Welcome back to our. It's sort of a a space between chapters 8 and 9, and welcome back to the Rupert Spira book study, Being Myself book. And we're, as I mentioned in the email that went out, this week will be a little bit different, and I know many of you will be happy to hear your questions answered that were posted from chapter 1. We've saved all the questions and comments, and we've moved them over to a document. And Jenny and I are going to look at the questions. A few of the questions answered, or a few of the questions offered, will be answered all at one time by someone else's question. So thank you for being here to co-host this, Jenny. I really appreciate your input and your expertise, and welcome.
Lovely to be here, Bill. Lovely to see everyone.
So let's, why don't we go ahead and get started with the questions, and then if you have any additional questions, we'll save those till we get close to the end. And this may run till a quarter till, but if you have hands up, we'll pick those questions up after we look at the ones that have come in from the very first chapter up to last week, chapter 8. So you want to get started then, Jenny? Where do you want to start?
Yes, I actually want to start with a question from chapter 8, because I think it's a question from James, and it's a very important question, and I think it helps to answer quite a lot of the other questions that are around. And what he asks is, he says there's one self, one awareness. So who is this my that we keep talking about, that we need to do inquiry? Are we not the dream in the one mind? So what are we doing one way or another, realizing the I am, or being entangled in objects? I know it's all true, but sometimes I find the languaging seems to contradict what we say. There is no distinction. So is it God in denial, ignorance, and resistance that we call we? Well, this really illustrates the fact that we can talk at two different levels, and it's really important to know which level we're talking at. So yes, absolutely, there's one self, one awareness, and if by my we refer to one awareness, then absolutely, all of the entangling, or it is just a dream that is occurring in, you can call it the mind of that one awareness, a dream that's occurring in that one awareness. So it's awareness that's playing this game of ignorance. Now, what that game of ignorance is, it's really a manifestation, a sort of manifestation of the energy of that one awareness as a whole set of objects and phenomena. And so some of these objects and phenomena are human body minds. Some of them are stars, planets, all sorts of things, animals. But some of them are human body minds. So it's equally reasonable to ask that same question from the perspective, from the point of view of a particular body mind, provided we don't believe ourselves to be that body mind, to be only that body mind. We know that the body, for example, is not what we essentially are, because the body is changing all the time. We're breathing in air, all of the time. We're eating food. The cells of our body are changing all the time. So that's not what we essentially are. And in fact, the body itself, all we know of the body is arisings in mind. So, for example, there are bodily sensations which we're aware of. Those arise in mind, in what we call my mind. We can look at parts of our body. We can look at our hands, we can look at our feet. Some bits we can't look at too easily, like the backs of our heads, or things that are the back of our body generally, without a set of mirrors. So, but also all of that, all of those perceptions of the body and the sensations of the body also occur in mind. So there are arisings within mind, and it's perfectly okay to refer to me or I or my or we collectively as mind, as a set of minds, provided we don't believe that all we are is a mind. Because again, just like the body is changing all the time, the mind is changing all the time even more, because mind is nothing more than a set of sensations, perceptions, thoughts, images, memories, things like that. It's just a flow. That's all mind is. So it's very important to distinguish between mind and awareness. Awareness is the reality, the background in which mind, body, and all of our experience arises. So there isn't really any contradiction. We just need to be absolutely clear from which perspective we are speaking at any one moment.
Right. And, of course, the title of the book, Being Myself, this is absolutely speaking to I am, to the self, or to awareness that is, I call this awakening awareness. I haven't heard Rupert say that, but I call it awakening awareness. So it's the awareness that is sufficiently divested or unveiled, or not divested, but sufficiently thinned the veil between ignoring the awareness and being asleep. I call it awakening awareness, even though there's no such thing. It's sort of a concession to that, to the idea that because the question is a great question. How does the self, which self is it? And thank you for that explanation, Jenny. It was beautiful.
Yes, this is really what we mean by enlightenment. Is almost like two steps. The first step is the understanding, I am awareness. The second step is the understanding, the awareness that I am is universal. There is only one awareness. So in a sense, awakening awareness is probably something that's in the mind, that sort of comes and goes in the mind, because ultimately there's only one awareness, and that's what we discover in enlightenment.
Yes. Well, it's the mind that actually starts the journey. I mean, it's the mind that thinks it wants to wake up. So thankfully that mechanism is in place, or none of us would be here.
Exactly, yes.
So and also, I just want to say that we're saving some of the questions for Rupert. He'll be here in a couple of weeks, and if you would like to further investigate this question when he's here, that would be a good thing, a good time to present that question for him. But we're going to save 3 or 4 of the questions that we feel are Rupert's questions. We're going to save them for a couple more weeks for him. And why don't we just go up and look at some of the questions that came in for chapter 1?
Yes. So this first question, the original sin, or the original sense of being apart from self and separated, was this the only way that we could have an experience of ourself and express into form? Well, again, we have to be very careful what we mean by we there. It is the way, whether it's the only way, but if we're speaking from the point of view of the absolute, from awareness, or from the one universal self, then that is the way it expresses itself. It expresses itself in form. That manifestation is a movement of awareness, and it just so happens that human minds kind of continue that division. They provide a mechanism for awareness to play that game of ignorance. So that's King Lear doing all the rather silly things that King Lear actually does. Playing the game of ignorance.
Yes. And I like to change, it came in as a Christian, or not came in, but was there for a while. And the word sin, I like to immediately change that word to a belief that I'm separate, a belief that I'm not what I am. And really that is, for me, as a past Christian, that feels cleaner than the word sin, which makes me think I'm in trouble.
Yes. Yes, it sounds really bad, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
But yeah, sin's a product. It's a natural product of awareness.
And that's another thing, Jenny. You remember when we did that 1 year of there is only one being?
Yes.
We talked about that for an entire year. There's only one being. So anything that's happening in this bodysuit, in the so-called ego, it's not separate from I before a name is put on it. Yeah. It's the same essence of being that's arising in all its manifest seeming separate or seeming forms. It's the same I. It just looks different, or feels, if it seems to be separate, but yet it is coming from that.
Yes, and the apparent separateness is absolutely natural, and it's the source of beauty, ultimately, isn't it? And so, yes, it's a way of appreciating beauty, and beauty is one of the natural attributes of awareness.
Yeah. So let's move down to the question that's on page 8. It states, this is from G. Franco. On page 8, it states that enlightenment is simply the revelation of the original nature of our self or being. This is deceiving simply. This being said, are there any suggestions that would assist us to make this state stick, as our minds are constantly chatting?
Right. Well, there are some assumptions in this question. And perhaps the first assumption is that enlightenment is a state of the mind, and enlightenment isn't a state of the mind. Enlightenment is simply the understanding, as you say. He says the revelation, so the understanding of the original nature of our self or being. So that original nature being awareness or reality or being. But particularly, most importantly, that it's universal, that it's the same everywhere, that there's no separate beings. There is only one one being. So that's not a state. Once you understand something, then you understand it. Now you might forget it. You might forget what you understood. That happens. And it happens with all sorts of things, but that doesn't mean that the understanding has gone. So I think what he's asking about is what is sometimes called establishment, to make that understanding stick, in the sense that we are always living from that understanding, on the basis of that understanding. And really there are all sorts of suggestions, and lots of suggestions throughout the whole of this book, but perhaps the most important one is whenever you feel separate, or whenever there's any kind of awkwardness or any kind of discomfort or any kind of suffering, just go back to that essential self, that essential being. Go back to being myself. Yeah. And that is the whole message of this book. So that is really the most important tip I think one can give. Obviously, Rupert has written lots of other books, and they go into the sort of self-inquiry. So if we feel that there are somehow the mind brings up lots of objections to the idea that we are that there is only one being, and it needs some self-inquiry to sort that out. But that's not something covered specifically in this book. If people want to look at that, then I would suggest two lovely books, the 2 volumes of Presence, very, very good for self-inquiry.
Yeah, we did a book study on both of those. They're in the library on billfree.com. You can find the entire. You can go to the chapter you want and see what was discussed about it, and it's right there for you, free. And there's another question from, and actually that one came from Nona, and this next question also came from Nona. What are suggested ways or cues to keep connected to the essential self? And I think you just answered that, right?
Yes. I think that's the most important one, really.
Yeah. So, and what I've noticed, if in the webinars that I've been with Rupert, this is the thing I love about Rupert. That's where he starts. He starts right there every time. He doesn't take you off on some other idea that's related. He always brings you to what is aware of this experience, because that to me is the essential ingredient. It's where the light does all the work. It's where the light that we are, it shines on all illusory concepts, ideas, feelings, experiences. It shines on that. So if we rest in that, and that's what where Noni says, you mentioned touching our hearts, looking for reminders. Well, those are just sort of anchors. Like I use the anchor of putting the hand on the heart. Somehow it just drops me into aware presence, of felt and experience. It's just something that sort of came in, but everyone has the same awareness. So it's not my awareness and your awareness is different. We just have different sort of mechanisms of reminders, I think.
Yes, yeah.
So there's another question. You want to look at the one at the beginning of chapter 2, Jenny?
I thought that one really should be left
For Rupert?
for Rupert.
Okay.
I mean, we could cover it, but it would take quite a lot of explanation.
Okay.
And I think perhaps it's best for a longer conversation, which will be possible.
Okay.
Ideally, that person could have a dialogue with Rupert on that. It would be nice.
Good. So, Francis, that's your question from chapter 2. We'll bring that to Rupert, or you can just raise your hand when he's here and you can ask yourself. And just to move over to the chat for just a minute, because this is relative to what we just said, Jenny, Marta Hunt said, Bill and Jenny, are you saying that fear and pain experienced on earth are part of one being, of the one being?
Yes, absolutely. It's the one awareness, experiencing pain, experiencing everything, not just pain, everything that is experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why suffering occurs. Suffering occurs when we're attached, when the identity of I am, or the identity of being, is attached its identity to this this thing that's arising, whatever it is, and when we step back enough, or what we are established as an understanding of our of knowing the self, then we stop suffering by the thing that's arising. We just allow it to rise, and we don't touch it.
Yes. Psychological suffering, when we're established as our true nature, as true being, then that disappears. Physical pain won't disappear. It might or might not get a bit less. It can get a little bit less because there's less psychological pain entangled with it, and causing tensions in the body, and tensions in the body can make physical pain worse. But yes, it's that it won't get rid of physical pain, but what you find is that underlying deep peace is not affected by physical pain.
Right. Yeah. And this is why being, having this understanding, this is like, this is the grail. This is the holy grail. This is what everyone is searching for, is an understanding. And I like Rick's comment. He mentioned something about understanding that says there isn't a somebody that understands. Great distinction. It's just that understanding is, and it brings with it the clarity and the certainty of I am, that is not attached to the experience that's rising.
Yes, that's really important. Understanding isn't something that occurs in the mind. It's beyond the mind. Understanding, whatever it's understanding of, whether it's understanding something spiritual or understanding something mathematical, it comes from beyond the mind. It's from pure awareness itself. It's not within the mind.
Yeah. You want to look at Ariana's question?
Right, yes. If being never changes at all, what is the point of our lives? What is the point in becoming individuals? Well, we never do. Awareness never becomes in an individual. So there are no real individuals. Awareness modulates itself in a vast array of names and forms, but all are utterly interconnected. So there is no point or purpose in the life of an individual form. And I'm not just talking about human beings here, individual forms. It includes mountains and stars, everything phenomenal comes and goes. So human beings, human body minds, they come and go. Animal body minds come and go. The stars and planets and galaxies, they also come and go, and none of them have a point or a reason or a purpose. They don't need one. They just are as they are. They are just manifestation. Sometimes people like to say, well, it's awareness enjoying itself, just having fun playing a game, and that's okay. You can think of it that way, as long as you don't turn awareness into an object, into a kind of pseudo person. But really, it's really is. It's just what happens. It's just how things are.
And I mean, I'm laughing because I think that's a huge pill to swallow. That there's no purpose, and it's just happening. And Ariana, be gentle and patient on yourself as you swallow that pill, and it will get better. And also, one of the things I've heard is that, and it's similar to what you just said, Jenny, that consciousness is just in a dance. It's a play of consciousness. And when you think about it in terms of a billion years, what is it? It's not even a grain of sand in the vast infiniteness of what we truly are. And when you think of what we truly are, awareness is, and planets and galaxies rise in that. So what's this? Right?
Well, what we are is utterly immense. It's utterly awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
It's beyond conception.
Yeah. So the body mind really has an attachment. The personal self really has an attachment to how important this is.
Yeah. Yes.
So at the beginning of chapter 3, there's a question from Eve that says, our self can only know something at an apparent distance from itself. We cannot separate ourself from ourself. Question, is the only way to experience myself to be separate, or is to separate in duality to experience the experience? It's a great question. Jenny?
Yeah, yes. Yes, there is not an experience and an experiencer. The mind can only think in terms of an experiencer experiencing an experience. That's just how the mind works. But in reality, there is no separation between experience and experiencer. And it's something that's not really graspable by the mind, but the way you can access it is through this sinking back into pure being, into pure awareness. And then there is experience. It's non-objective experience. So it's not experience that you can remember and recall, but it is experience which has that kind of flavor of experience and experiencer being one. So that's really the best way of approaching the answer to that question. Just sink back below all objective experience. So all perceptions, all your bodily sensations, all your thoughts. Don't give them any attention. Don't try to get rid of them. Don't give them any attention. Just sink back below that. It's like falling asleep while remaining awake. And that gives you the answer, but not an answer that the mind can really grasp.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Great answer for that. And, and this is why it's so, it's really important that we find that place of understanding and where we're established as the screen that Rupert uses as a metaphor, and watch the You movie, watch the Bill movie for me, watch the Jenny movie, and just allow it to be what it is. And that's a place that's available, and it lightens up the circumstances that aren't always that pleasant or aren't even happy, that can be sad. It lightens it up and gives you a little space between from the suffering, from the entanglement, so to speak.
Yes.
And then Henrik had a question here. By focusing on who I am, I release thoughts I've identified with. By focusing on who I am, I release thoughts I've identified with. Is that also what happens when we die? Do we then release patterns we have identified with and return to our self? So it's almost like an assumption and two questions.
There's an assumption that we die.
Two assumptions. There's an assumption that we're releasing thoughts, and there's an assumption that we die.
Yes, yeah, but that's really the question to ask. Can I choose my thoughts, and equally, can I choose to stop thoughts? And really, what we find is the answer to that is no. That thoughts arise just by themselves. Sometimes we lay claim to having produced certain thoughts, like a decision. We claim, "Well, I decided this," but that happens after the effect. That's just the mind coming in and laying claim to something that's already happened and already been produced by awareness. We have no evidence that awareness will die. Bodies die. Yes, we know about that, and we presume, although we don't know, but we presume that minds die as well, roughly the same time, maybe a bit later. We don't know, but we have no evidence whatsoever that awareness has a beginning or an end.
Yeah, who would be there to verify? I mean, or what would verify that something occurred?
Well, yes, if there's only one, then there's nothing to verify, is there?
Right. Rana put a question, and if like I said in the beginning, if these answers aren't adequate, just bring it back when Rupert's here, and he'll, I'm sure he'll clear it up. And so looking at chapter 4, there's a question from Rana. Is a person an attribute or aspect of awareness?
Neither, really. By person, I assume that she means a body mind, a human body mind, and that they're just patterns arising. All human body minds are just patterns arising within awareness, not really an attribute. Just patterns. Just like chairs and tables and mountains and stars, all of them.
Yeah. I want to go back to the idea that there's no, we don't choose our thoughts, because that is, once you once you understand that and you can rest in that, that's very liberating.
That has so many implications. It's to really feel that. It's really deep. To understand it intellectually, I don't think is so difficult, really, because if we could choose our thoughts, we would only choose nice thoughts, happy thoughts all the time. But it doesn't happen like
Right.
that. We know really that thoughts just arise, suddenly come into our minds and then flow out through the mind. The thoughts, we certainly have habits of thoughts. So there are certain types of thoughts which are more likely to arise in some types of minds than others. So musical thoughts tend to arise in a musician's minds, and mathematical thoughts in mathematicians' minds, and so on. But that doesn't mean that in either case they choose them.
Right.
They just arise on their own. But that is absolutely huge, because our thoughts really are. The decisions we make are based on thoughts. So a decision is really like a deciding thought. And what that means is that there's no separate entity that is responsible for a decision, and therefore no entity that is responsible for an action that flows from that decision. And that means there's no guilt at the personal level, or whatever a particular body mind has done in the past that arose as a result of a thought. So that thought wasn't chosen by that particular body mind. It doesn't choose its thoughts. It was chosen by the universe and chosen by awareness,
right,
by the totality.
yes,
That's what chose it.
yes.
So
Can only be one chooser.
Yes.
If there's only one being, there can only be one chooser.
Yeah.
I interviewed Francis Lucille about 6 months ago, and it was just he and I was doing a little preview for one of the conferences, and he came on and he said, we didn't choose to be here. This is not something that we chose to do. This was chosen for us. Or
exactly.
and using us as a concession even. But he said there is no chooser, that you didn't choose to be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of funny, because everyone here thinks, oh, of course I chose to be here. Well,
look at it carefully, because yes, you didn't. The universe chose for you to be here, which is lovely. I'm very glad it did.
Yeah. So if we go down and look under a little bit lower, it says from Jana on page 38, Rupert talks about attention. Often we direct our attention away from ourselves to the content of experience. Does he explain who or how is this attention directed? Who decides? Here it is again. Who decides or directs where the attention goes?
Yes, and of course, that awareness itself, the universe, decides where. Decides even isn't it quite the right word, because ultimately awareness is outside of time, and a decision implies time. But if we're talking about it from the point of view of the mind, then we have to use words like decide. So I think the important point about attention is that, as Rupert explains, our attention normally is directed towards objects. And he explains it comes from the Latin tendere, to stretch towards. So our attention is stretched towards an object. And there is a kind of very, very subtle tension in that. I think we know that very clearly if we're focusing very precisely. If you're doing something very delicate, or doing some embroidery or something like that, you're focusing really, really tightly, and you can sense a very, very subtle tension. So there's always tension in attention. Now, when Rupert talks about attention being directed instead towards ourself, well, there's kind of two stages to that. Firstly, it's taking the attention away from the object towards another object, which we are calling for the moment ourself. But then what he's suggesting is going beyond that. So in other words, I am is seen initially as an object, but you go beyond I am to that sense of being, to really being myself. And as you go on, as you go beyond that, as you go inwards, attention drops. The tension in attention relaxes. So there's no attention anymore. Attention is completely unfocused. It relaxes back into itself, into its source, because its source is awareness.
Yeah, and it's kind of tricky. This is a tricky kind of a idea, because there's no chooser, and yet we're seemingly moving attention from the awareness that chooses, moving its attention from the experience, or from the seeming separate experience or object of experience, to back. It seems like it's just choosing to relax back into its essential self. And in the transmission of all of that, the body-mind personal experience thinks it's involved.
Yes, it does. And the way to the way to mitigate that is, instead of thinking of it as choosing to relax back, think of it as responding to an invitation, as an invitation from awareness. Awareness is always inviting us. It's always inviting us back into itself. So if you think of it just as responding to that invitation, there's less of a feeling of doing or action about it, isn't there?
And I think this happens naturally once you begin to. What seems like the experience for me is that the more I am immersed in this understanding, the more that I see that Bill, the bodysuit, doesn't really make decisions, is just sort of being moved.
Yes. And it's lovely. It's a kind of floaty feeling. You float through life. Yes.
Yeah. And with all the speakers, I have probably talked to 50 of the teachers around the world that of different levels for the conferences. And what I find is that those that are established in this understanding, they speak of those same that same movement.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very, very. I mean, it's across the board. They're all the same, and so it's verifiable in many other beings, many other bodysuits, or that are. I don't want to get caught on the word beings, but the next question that we have that is from Andrew, just above chapter 8, is I understand the spiritual words such as witness, being aware, awareness, being myself. However, I struggle with the word being or I am. What is the metaphor for understanding being?
I don't think there's really a metaphor for that. I suppose the screen is maybe a suitable metaphor, but often that's used for awareness. But awareness and being are really the same thing. Being, another word for being is reality. And so what is the reality? What is the essential reality of myself? We say, what is my essential being? What is my essential reality? So
I like the word. I was going to
I'm
say,
not
I
a
like
set
the
of
word.
separate cells.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm not a body made of cells and things. I'm not a mind made of thoughts. What am I really made of? What is my essential reality?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I like the word, I mean, to narrow it down, just the isness, just the isness of, and even that's too much of a word. So it's just don't say anything there, you're there.
Yes. And it's enlightenment is a recognition that essential nature, that essential isness is the same isness of the planets and the stars and the earth and of everything and of all of the animals on it. It's not a human isness. It's an everything isness.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about this idea, this whole pointing right now is where peace lies. It's where love resides. It's where joy is. It's happiness. All of those things are established in that same isness with no name.
Yes.
Yeah. So I like this question from Landon, Jenny.
Right. About our other traditions.
Yeah, it says not to cast aspersions. Yeah. At all upon other traditions. Yes, that's it. But it does raise the question for me of what is being gained or achieved, though that word is probably not generally used by marathon meditators, by long sits, hours and hours during the days, often weeks or months at a time, each to his or her own, I suppose. So what is gained by Vipassana meditations or, those lengthy sitting experiences?
I suppose if people just enjoy it for itself, I don't think anything is going to be gained spiritually in many cases from very long periods of meditation. The methods used in it can work as a sort of preliminary to the direct path, but in this path, we just do what we enjoy. And the more you go back to being myself, the more you enjoy it. So, and the more you're invited back there. And so you just respond to that. You just accept the invitation. The problem and the danger with long periods of meditation, and I used to do this. I would practice huge amounts of each day, not just meditation, but all sorts of different spiritual practices. And it was always in order for a separate entity to get somewhere, to get into a particular state or to stay in a particular state. And that's never going to work, because what enlightenment is about is the understanding that, no, I'm not a separate entity. There is only one being, and I am that.
What's interesting, thank you for that answer. I love the answer, and you totally nailed it, because a lot of everyone doesn't use meditation for that experience. I like the way Rupert describes it, as that meditation isn't something that you do, it's something that you are. And what does that mean? For me, it means I'm meditating right now. It means that I'm meditating when I mow the yard or anything, or when I we're always in a living meditation experience. It doesn't require, and it really is a distraction. If you're trying to move into a state, you're moving to something that's more of a body-mind identity. And yet, Jenny, awareness is the chooser for that long period of meditation as well. So if that's what's happening, just don't touch it.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if people enjoy doing it, but sometimes, I don't know, people need to go through a particular preliminary path. I think Rupert does say that. He refers to mantra meditation, which is also the path which I came through. But part of it is to learn that's never going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
Part of it is to learn that that no state of the mind is really going to give you what you want.
Yeah. And also it's, these tools that are used, meditation, when you go to a Rupert retreat, when you go to a Francis Lucille retreat, you're going to be involved in what's being termed meditation. And I really feel that that's a different kind of meditation. It's more of an inquiry to establish oneself as the to establish oneself as the awareness of experience.
Yes, it's partly contemplation and partly just being silent together, but that also is contemplation, because you're not contemplating an object as you're doing with mantra meditation. You're just allowing attention to rest back into its source. And my definition of meditation is that you're meditating whenever you don't feel yourself to be a separate entity. Whenever you are not in ignorance,
yes,
then you are automatically in meditation, and that would be my definition of the word.
Yeah. And there were a few Course in Miracles questions. I'll defer them to Sunday. If you want to come to the 3:00 Q&A on Sunday, it's a few hours before the Super Bowl, so you won't have to miss that. And Rick has a couple of comments. He says, some confusion and many more questions, yet something deeply resonates. It appears that the confusion doesn't completely lift, nor are all the questions resolved. However, the individual that seems confused or has so many questions becomes mortally wounded and slowly begins to vanish.
Well, is there such an entity in the first place? I think that would be a question to ask. What is there to vanish? Nothing.
Yes, exactly. And then there's a question from Patty that she sort of laughs at from last week. Awareness is indivisible. So how can it join?
It doesn't join. Awareness is all that is. So there's nothing to join in its the movement of awareness, or vibration of awareness is what produces manifestation, and manifestation is the apparent division into objects, and what joins those objects then is awareness, because they're all made out of it. So you could think of joining in that sense, but awareness itself, there's nothing outside of awareness. There's nothing inside of it and nothing outside of it. It just is.
Yeah, that's very comforting to realize also, is that there is only awareness.
Yes.
There's only awareness, and everything else comes and goes. And the other cool part, since we don't make choices, if we just allow awareness to be as it is, awareness will move us. The body mind will be moved. And my experience is when I am in that space, when I notice that I'm in that space, it's very smooth and doesn't, it's very easy. There's no resistance involved.
There's no separation between you and the world. There's no separate entity which is moving in a separate world. And that's a lovely, it's a warm, loving, comforting feeling to live like that.
Yeah. There's a little bit of comments on the chat about still choosing. And I think this would probably be another good question for Rupert. When he's here in a couple of weeks, you'll hear his concise response to that question that maybe comes in a little deeper for you. And that would be my suggestion, to have it for when Rupert comes.
That's a very good topic to discuss with him, and ideally, Bill, you get someone to come on live and have a dialogue with him on that.
Oh yes, for sure.
I think that would be good.
Yeah. There's I don't, if we have time. Well, we have about 2 minutes left. Eve says meditation becomes the initiating energy that one brings to any minute of the day, regardless of the event. Meditation is the event.
Yes. Yeah.
That sounds reasonable. That sounds like I feel like I'm meditating when I'm building things, and my wife feels like she's in meditation, especially when she's in the kitchen cooking. She feels like, she just leaves any kind of efforting. It just is, Lisa's magic kitchen.
It's just allowing the Lisa body mind to get on with the cooking, and awareness enjoys the show.
Yeah. So before we sign off, just a couple of things. I posted, if you're not in the portal newsletter, I posted that I'm taking 2 tours to India with someone I met at one of Rupert's retreats. And if you are interested, just write to me at billfreeonline@gmail.com. And then Lisa and I are doing a 90-minute session on Tuesday, I think. If you're interested in that, just write to me at billfreeonline@gmail.com. If you're not on our newsletter, write to me. If you're in the newsletter, you probably already know it. And thank you all for being here. This has been awesome. Thank you, Jenny, for just jumping in and being I always think of you as Rupert in a woman's body. And thank you for that, your awesome clarity in these matters. And thank you everyone for being here. And we'll see you next week. We'll have, let's see, who do we have next week? I'm sorry, I don't have my schedule up.
Patty Harley next week.
Oh, Patty. It's Patty next week. Oh, good. So Patty's right here with us today. And looking forward to chapter 9 with Patty as a co-host. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you all for being here. Bye, Jenny.
Thank you.
Bill.
Thank you, Jenny.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.